Hey guys, this is Tiffany. How are you? Welcome back to Your Awakening. Thank you for tuning in. Alright, so I've had some serious requests, and if I'm being completely honest, this is something that has my full attention too. I mean, it's just blown up my mind. Alright, so I'm going to dive right in. So there is this thing called the Mandela effect. Now, Nelson Mandela was the president in South Africa, right? Nelson Mandela, and he's got a lot of like famous quotes that people use. He was very wise, actually. Pretty honorable man. Okay, so that's who he is. Now, somewhere in his life, he became imprisoned. There isn't really a lot of history, which I've been saying in every video. History as we know it, whether it be in history books or on YouTube or Google or wherever, it's just like gone. I'm serious. So, all right, that was my serious face for a minute. All right, so Nelson Mandela ends up in prison for something at some point in his life. All right, I need to kind of go back, but you guys know me. I'm going to kind of go back over here, and then I'll come back over here, and I always bring it full circle every time. Okay, last time I did an episode on the Salem witch trials, and I explained to you that based on these little children lying about seeing, like witches, specters, witches. Okay, sorry, that wasn't supposed to rhyme. Little children were pretending that people were a witch, men and women, right around the same time that a book, something Leviticus, came out. And inside of this book, it says, if you are A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, then you are a witch. Some of the things included a witch's teat, which is like a literal birthmark or a mole. Okay, so that's what began the actual Salem witch trials. And Salem is in Massachusetts, but these witch trials, they were worldwide. And you know what? I can recall incidents in the 90s. They're just called witch hunts now, okay? Like I'm not even going to go there about the West Memphis 3 or some of the things that happened in the late 90s. But anyway, a bunch of children lied about the fact that these people, who ironically were like the same people. Okay, we're talking about Puritans during Salem, Massachusetts, during the Salem witch trials, at least in Salem, Massachusetts. They're Puritans. People that are on the property, and then they begin to, see or get visited by somebody's specter, which is a witch coming to you like via a dream. And it's way worse than that. Like some of the husband. Okay, look, this little book made people so paranoid that people all over the world were sending little small troops of, I guess you could call them, well, back in those days, investigators, right? They would go there and investigate and then try and hang, burn, whatever, stone to death, shame, inspect bodies, and inevitably, after they've hung them, they would throw them in the water after having been hung for at least 14 hours to overnight to see if any of the witches or witches' specters would come back to haunt the children again. Yeah, not one case. But anyway, that's what got rid of spectral evidence. That's when it became law that you cannot just use the fact that some, especially a child, but anybody in general, it may be more commonplace now for me to say hearsay, and maybe that makes sense to you. maybe that makes better sense, but it's the same thing. Spectral evidence went away because of the Salem witch trials. Now, remember, this book came out way back then. Salem, Massachusetts, and Salem witch trials. You know, I don't really like have a good reason why that specific one was so prominent when this was happening all over the world at the same time. These, you know, priests and I don't know if they had preachers back then. It doesn't matter. It's the equivalent to basically a whole bunch of Amish people, and then a book comes out and says, everybody's witch, be scared. Witches are going to like suckle on a witch's teat. Your farms, your crops are not going to grow because a witch is tormenting you. Women, y'all better watch out, because these these witches, you know, their specters will come visit your husband. Yeah. Yep. Spectral evidence. So you've got a bunch of men freaking out. And back in those days, it's really not that different from these days. I guess if a man says that a woman's crazy, then I guess a woman is crazy. And, you know, that word does not offend me. And as you go through your awakening process with me, you're not going to care about that word. It's actually good that people think that we're crazy at this point, because if they didn't think we were crazy, then they would think that we were, God forbid, you know, giving away historical evidence. All right, back to Salem witch trials for just a second. Sorry, one sec. So there's a group of like 5 or 6 little kids. There is a book that has the names of some of the most prominent families, equivalent, you know, crops, money, land, house. Okay, so it's kind of ironic. The book comes out, the spectral evidence starts happening, a whole bunch of kids start convulsing. It starts with one child. One child just like wakes up one day, and you gotta understand that when you put the fear of God into Puritans, it's literally like, I mean, I don't want to keep comparing it to Amish, but that's how serious this is. I mean, you can't do that, especially not in those days. They are so God-fearing. And these are back in the days where they actually think there are witches, which is fine. There have always been witches, but it's worded a little bit differently. It's a more practical approach to medicine, white magic, you know, witchcraftery is really the essence of kind of, you know, Mother Earth and the elements, earth, wind, air, fire. You take them, and back in the day before we had traditional medicine or Western medicine, I mean, how were you supposed to heal each other? Why do you think so many women died during childbirth? Why do you think so many children died at such young ages? I mean, we've got rubella, we've got plagues, we've got, you know, scarlet fever, we've got all kinds of stuff. And now let's throw in a book. I don't even know who wrote the book, but I bet you his name had the word Leviticus in it, because that was part of the name of the book. So they start sending people, investigators all over the world. In Salem, Massachusetts, which is here in the United States, one child says something. Now, you'll find, oh Lord, let me back up, rewind. You're probably never going to find the movie that I'm referring to. There's 2 very good examples that used to be on YouTube that were in regards to the Salem witch trials. Sort of documentary type, not really like a docu-series, not more than 1 episode, sort of. I believe one's a movie and one's like a, you know, educational History Channel kind of informative piece. And I guarantee you they're both gone, or at least one. Okay, so what happened after the first child starts freaking out to mommy and daddy, right? Oh my gosh, so-and-so's specter is haunting me in my sleep. They're literally sending their specter, their actual physical ghost, while they're still alive, by the way. So, I don't know, I can't even say this one with a straight face, but I'm going to try my absolute hardest to try to keep a straight face with you on this, because it's not funny. But it is, looking back, it's ridiculous. And this is one of those things where I like to make up words like redonkulous. It is so far above ridiculous, it is redonkulous. All right, so it just so happens that some of the richest family in the Puritans, very specific names were written down in this book of the people who did undergo the Salem witch trials and were hung and tried, or, you know, asked to confess to something that they did not do and say, I'm a witch, please spare me from whatever. It didn't matter what they promised them. Okay, no witch ever came back out of the water alive. So I guess she wasn't a witch, or he. It started out with women. But because of these children, and because of the family, the land belonging to this specific Puritan family, or group of families, shall I say, the richest, 4 or 5 families in that area during that time, all of a sudden everybody who wasn't them was being haunted by a witch or a witch's specter. Oh, specifically people who gave them a dirty look, or God forbid didn't go to church on Sunday, or even if they did go to church on Sunday, these children were acting out in church. These children that we're just going to pretend there was 5 or 6, because there's no evidence of what number there really was. So a handful of children, young children, anywhere I would guess between the ages of 4 and 11. It starts out, oh, mommy, daddy, I see so-and-so's specter. It's coming to my bed. It's at the end of my bed. The witch is coming to get me. She's scaring me. She's, opening windows? Okay, well, you can't open windows back in those days because we didn't have sliding windows. These houses were made by hand out of wood. Just saying. Spectral evidence. So everybody that looked at anybody who wasn't part of one of these founding families of this property in Salem, Massachusetts, and all of them are very, very, very Puritan. They don't know any other thing than that. So when somebody from somewhere outside of that area comes into your city, state, town, country, and says, hey, look, there's this book. It's called something Leviticus. And it says that we have to, by law, inspect every single person's body everywhere. And by the way, you guys need to tell us who the witches are. Oh my, is their specter coming to visit you? So now we've got a bunch of children that all start acting up at the same time. Before I go there, I want to say one more thing. After the children started doing it, I think that the wives of these men maybe became paranoid about the fact, probably definitely became paranoid about the fact that, this is, I don't know if it's pre or post lobotomy days, but if a man says you're crazy back in those days, you're crazy and you're going to die. So either you admit that you're a witch, which you are not, or you're crazy and you still get tried and hung for being a witch. So women back then, I don't know what they were doing, trying to keep their men from accusing them of having a mole or a freckle or not telling on them. Everyone outside of these founding 4 or 5 families, they were the first ones to go down. So they threw them in these, I guess you could call it a prison, but it's an underground place with no ventilation. It's like sort of like the movie Gladiator. You just kind of throw them down there in a hole, leave them there. You've got mothers that are trying to breastfeed babies, but you can't do that because there's no nutrition. They don't feed them. They don't let them take baths. There's no milk production to feed the babies. They all live together. They die down there together. Eventually, they all get hung and tried. And, I'm sorry, tried and hung. And back to the women for a second. Okay, so whatever was going on with the women, this hysteria that started with these children who started to say, hey, mommy, daddy, I'm seeing so-and-so's spector coming to me in the middle of the night. Now, this was before time was invented, so it's not like if I were to say, you know, like the Momo challenge, you know, 3 a.m. or something. It would be equivalent to that, but this is before time in the way that we see it now anyways. All right, so the women are desperate for their husband not to accuse them of being a witch. So, and I don't even know what part of this men, I really don't want to have to, yeah, I don't want to think about it. Let's just lay it out there. Children started freaking out. It started with one child. It always ends up with these 4 or 5 most prominent families at that time in life. It also always ends up with somebody being sent to each village, town, city, state, country, whatever, in a world full of Puritans, especially there. And now the men are starting to say, that these witches, spectral, they're I guess out of body experience ghosts is about the best way I can put it, is going to them in their actual bedside, right next to their wife. I mean, that's assuming that they, you know, to my recollection, they didn't even have, you know, men and women didn't sleep in the same bed. Everybody had like a little twin-size bed, and you crammed as many people as you could, from my recollection of everything I know about that time. So then men, you know, what do you do with that? How does a man say to his wife, whose wife has no say-so in anything, yeah, well, you know, so-and-so's specter is sexually visiting me in my sleep? And husband's getting aroused, and now wife is claiming that like these acts are happening between an invisible person and their husband. So obviously the wife is going to get abused for saying that. The wife probably just became a witch. I know that almost every single one of those 4 to 5 families, all but one, I'm pretty sure were all pretty much all went down. Those little kids now, what's happening with that? That is called mass hysteria. Mass hysteria is where you take what I just did, a very long example of something. You take one example where everybody all over the world, all over the place, it happens at the same time. So every time that you heard the word specter or spectral evidence back at the time during when the Salem witch trials were happening, before, during, and after, you know, persecution, death, and all that other good stuff. Sorry, I'm moving my headphones because they sometimes echo. I gotta be careful not to say that word too loud because of ALEXA over there. But I'm sorry, ALEXA. Yeah, her. She's annoying. All right, mass hysteria. So the first kids start off doing this. Then they start, you know, seizing. And by seizing, I don't mean epileptic medical seizures. And by the way, all you have to go on before Western medicine was, I mean, just a second ago, you're using it to help my wife give birth to a baby by rubbing whatever, I don't know, rosebud petals, I don't know, aloe, I don't know. But it wasn't witchcraft until it was. The same herbs that they used to make them, you know, a cup of tea to calm them down, or for instance, I know for a fact that black licorice can help you go into labor. So can eggplant. So can a few other things I could name. Now, they have to grow their own crops. So if they're growing crops and wild flowers and things that they're using and have always used as natural remedies to things before Western medicine, doctors and medicine, and I'm not going to go the route vaccinations yet, but I'm going to get to that tonight. Anyway, point is, they start seizing. So anybody who tries to help these children to stop seizing, and it goes down like this. You've got one child. It always happens in church too. Not touching that one yet. Every single time they go to church, every single time the doors are open is when they're going to church like literally probably every day around the clock, all day, every day, trying to repent for spectral sins. Is that a thing? Yeah, I just made that a thing, so that's a thing. Spectral thoughts of spectral sexual things with invisible spectrums because of a book that somebody sent to these 5 founding most prominent families over here in Salem, Massachusetts, who have these children. 1 here, 1 there, 2 there. The first one, Mommy, Daddy, I see the spectral evidence. Oh, what are we going to do? We'll go tell whoever to fetch her up something. Well, when you go tell whatever her name is to go fetch her up something to try to get her to stop freaking out or being, hysteric, well, now that child is being forced to tell the name of the person who went to fetch them. Excuse me. For instance, like a cold rag or a raspberry or a flower. It doesn't matter. It could have been chamomile. It does not matter what it was. But before this book came out, it was not witchcraft to go and grow crops and flowers and things like that. And now that there is this book out and everybody is physically being their bodies inspected in front of the whole community, husbands are ashamed, wives are afraid of their husbands, children, oh my God, these children just flat out lied. They created mass hysteria. One started seizing, they all started seizing. And I don't mean seizing like actually having a seizure. I mean wailing around like a bunch of bratty little children that just really need their butt whooped back in the day. Because, I don't really care how you take me. I'm always going to be blunt, I'm always going to be honest, and I'm always going to be straight to the point. I would never put my hands on a child. But back in that day, those kids, oh my God, they literally were giving out names of innocent people and watching them get tried, hung, left overnight, thrown in a river. Remember, this is public execution because back then they thought that by showing executions publicly that it would somehow create this effect of, oh, well, so-and-so won't do it because we publicly did that. Well, that one blew up in their face too, because then people became sort of morbidly fascinated with the idea of public executions. True. All right. So these kids are wailing themselves around. We're in church and oh my God, they're specter. Okay, you've got a whole town freaking out. You've got children that pretend to be, and I swear to God, it happens in order. One does it, and it's just bam, 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 bam. All 5 or 6 of these kids, they just start screaming. They just throw themselves on the floor and they just literally have temper tantrums. And based on their temper tantrums, whoever is at the head of that church, along with the new person that they've has been sent to them, the inspectors, to inspect every single person's body for correct signs of being a witch. Likes the smell of flowers, has a freckle, is married, has a husband, whatever. A lot of people died. Those little kids were really, really bad. I can't prove to you that what I know about them actually later in life admitting that they lied and that they were sorry about it. I don't know how I feel about that, so I'm not going to feel anything about it. I'm just going to keep the facts straight. That created mass hysteria on a worldwide level. Still to this day, 2019, still, you say that word, Salem witch trials, and I promise you, everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about to at least some tiny extent. And then you got to think back at, history repeats itself, except for in 2019 when history disappears. But the only good thing that came out of the Salem witch trials was the fact that mass hysteria, which is when everybody gets affected by the same thing at the same time, and then everybody obviously has mass hysteria, and they're scared to death that, like, the big bad wolf is coming, in this case a witch, or technically they're specter. All right, so I've read, and I know I guess I have some kind of proof or evidence that probably doesn't exist. These children did eventually fess up and say that they lied, and that there was no spectral evidence went out the window, Constitution, things like that were signed, and that was no longer allowed to be introduced into evidence in any court of law to this day right now. So that is mass hysteria, and I know I just gave you a super long, detailed version of that, but I need to go into this next piece. So that's mass hysteria. And now I'm going to go ahead and start in with the Mandela effect, because the Mandela effect is so much like mass hysteria. Just going to take a drink. If you guys ever want to know what I'm drinking, you could ask me. It's Red Bull. I hear it gives you wings, maybe. Oh yeah, these specters, they fly too on their broomsticks. I promise you. It's good stuff. Nelson Mandela, president, South Africa. Now, and I remember this. This is the crazy thing. I'm excited. I'm going to blow y'all's mind in just a sec. All right. So, you know what mass hysteria is. You know it came from, probably, like 100% sure, other incidences besides not just the Salem witch trial, but that was definitely probably the deal-breaking one for sure. I swear to you, I promise, I remember this. There are two things about Nelson Mandela, okay, that I've already told you. He was wonderful. He was the president of South Africa. He was so wise. I mean, he's created some of these like quotes that people still to this day, they still quote him. This man was so honorable and so beautiful. And I don't know why they sent him to prison, but they did. Now, two things happened. Now, the first version of this, in a mass hysteria sense, meaning the whole wide world, I promise you, and we'll get to why in a minute, somehow all became aware that he died in around the 1980s in prison. Okay, I vaguely remember seeing that on the news, but it's about to get worse. I also recall, and I do believe it was, oh, by the way, side note, the Mandela effect was actually coined and termed the Mandela effect based off of this person and this first example in 2010. So, I'm trying to look for the exact year, but look, it was in the 2000s. I think it was 2013. Anyway, there's a version that I remember. I remember waking up, and I believe it was somewhere around 2013, seriously. So internet's, I mean, that's not that long ago, guys. So even if it was like in the early 2000s, we still had internet. And the thing is that mass hysteria is very similar to what in this case is referred to as collective memory works. So you have a whole bunch of people, basically everyone, just about everyone in the world is in agreement that we all saw this thing happen on this time, on this day, and that's exactly what happened. Now, if you try to look up the definition of that, it tells you that collective memory doesn't work that way, which makes it just totally negated itself right there. How can you be a collective memory if a memory doesn't exist? So then we start going into other things, which I'm going to get into, and this is sort of where memory of the masses starts to come into play. But it is a collective memory that is presented in many different theories, and it deals with the memory of the masses. And just like mass hysteria, except it's not hysteria, it's a remembrance. We all remember this. So either you remember seeing Nelson Mandela go to prison and die somewhere in prison in 1980s. I've had another version that I've seen online somewhere that says that he was 80 years old. So basically the Mandela effect phenomena is because every single person, basically there's two sides. Either you saw this or you saw this. And I'm going to give you 100 other good examples. Okay, maybe not, maybe like 5, but and we're so convinced. I promise you, like, I swear to you, I saw his funeral. He got out of prison somewhere in the 2000s, and I remember his funeral. I mean, I can remember the coffin, and it had the colors. It was like green and yellow and red over the coffin where they were taking his body, like he was freed and released from prison for whatever it was, and he was set free for whatever it was he was in prison for anyways, because remember, history is gone. It keeps deleting itself. I could go there and tell you that's a Mandela effect, but I'm not. Yeah, I just did. So yeah. So when you've got a number of people who are calling something a strange event, the reason why they're calling this a strange event is because I will swear up and down all day long to your face that I literally remember watching that on the news, right? Just like JFK's. There's another example of a Mandela effect. And there's one version where, like I said, there's like, it's divide and conquer. So you got half the world that saw this and half the world that saw this. And both of them will swear to their death, on their deathbed, there is no mistaking, no doubt. So the fact that they're calling this a phenomena of people that share a memory that isn't true. How on earth do you share a memory that isn't true? Okay, I can understand like spectral evidence. I can understand perception. I can understand reality. I can understand that we live in an inverted reality. I can understand that we live in a parallel universe. I can understand all kinds of things. But when you legally term and coin this, the Mandela effect, it's a whole bunch of people having the same memory about something. And then in 2010, this thing called the Mandela effect becomes an actual thing, and it lines up with the the theory of the parallel universe. I'm going to touch on that, but I'm really, after this, I'm going to do a very long video on that parallel universe because I haven't touched on that yet. But let me stick to the Mandela effect for just a minute. So anyway, in the parallel universe, it basically means that, like, if there were 11 dimensions, okay, I like to use 11, and you'll learn why pretty quickly. 11 is 1, 1, 1, 1 equals parallel. So in parallel universes, where there's 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, 11D, right? You can kind of interweave in between, realms, dimensions, or other universes. However you'd like to, however you want to term that doesn't matter. What does matter is that legally like defined, and it's, I mean, they're calling it words like a confabulation. A confabulation? I mean, I understand fabrication, but a confabulation is where we all remember. I swear to you, I saw that funeral on TV. I swear to you that in JFK's car, right at the second that he got shot, there was two men in the front seat, and him and his wife were in the back seat, and Jackie was like kind of laying at the very end. He got shot, and then Jackie kind of like went on top of him, was like screaming, and I remember the dress she was wearing, the hat she was wearing. Well, the Mandela effect tells you that that's not true, and that never happened. It didn't happen. There was never a JFK shooting with, you know, two men in the front seat of the car and the president and the first lady in the back seat. Every piece of history you'll find on that right now will tell you it was more like a black SUV that had a third row of seats, meaning that the killer was the driver. Alrighty. That's the Mandela effect. There's no proof of it. I don't know what's the difference between that and spectral evidence. I mean, you're telling me that we live in a world where everything you've ever taught me to know is true is fake. All right, cool. I accepted that a long time ago. That's called waking up. That is the difference between us and them. Remember, there's two sides. There's those of us that are awake, and there's those of us that are asleep. Asleep equals a sheep. I call them sheep. Sheep, asleep, whatever. These are the people that walk around looking at their phone all day, like walking into traffic and letting their children play like Pokemon Go into, you know, some pedophile's front yard, and I don't even go in there. But then there's the other half of us who are awake and we're like, hey, you know what? No, you cannot force me to believe that. You will never convince me that this is true, because I saw it happen. I was there. I will testify it to my last dying breath. Now, hypothetically, if there were 8 billion people in the world, and I just said there's only two sides here, literally 4 billion of us to our death, much like the Salem witch trials, will swear that we're not witches, but we'll also swear that we saw that those two instances I just gave you on Nelson Mandela either dying in prison or getting released in his public funeral. It was televised, just like JFK's funeral was. I mean, the like literal seconds when he got shot is a very widely televised, was a very widely televised event. If you go to look it up now, what history is disappearing? So how do you convince a bunch of people that will swear up and down that we were there, we saw this? I'm sorry guys, my headphones, I know they are creating an echo. I'm going to, I don't know, I'm trying to like get them out of the way there a little bit so maybe they don't echo so bad. Hopefully that'll help. Anyway, and when you tell people that it's a Mandela effect and they don't believe you, well, you got to understand now we would live in a world where history is disappearing. So you are forcing us to go to literal institutions, such as the education institution, and you are shoving all this crap down our throat, telling us that we have to learn this and that and this and that and history, and I mean, right on down to what's in the history books, such as in the Salem witch trials. But I bet you the Mandela effect's not in the history books yet. So everything that disappears from history is now AKA the Mandela effect. It's a thing. It's a thing that is some sort of significant proof when there's no other explanation for why history disappears. So let's call it the Mandela effect. So did Nelson Mandela die in 1980 in prison? Or do you remember him getting set free? Do you remember his funeral? How about JFK? How many people were in that car? Do you remember that car being a convertible? Wasn't the lid off? Or the top? Wasn't there a man driving? Another man? Jackie? JFK? Do you remember that? Or do you remember a third row of seats? Literally. 2 in the front, whoever here, whichever order, it doesn't matter, but there were 3 rows of seats instead of 2 at the literal moment that JFK was murdered or assassinated. However you'd like to put that. Okay, so now that I have your full attention on what is the Mandela effect, I'm going to give you some crazy examples. I'm telling you, my head, oh my gosh, it's like, I have been so blown away lately about the fact that, you know, I have awakened here in 2019, and it is my job to awaken you. You guys know that, and I know that. I'm sorry, excuse my hand for just a minute. I didn't like where the camera was sitting. Look, y'all know that I am awake, and you know that I have awakened as a starseed / indigo with characteristics and traits of rainbow and crystal children. And that doesn't mean that I'm a child or that we're children. It just means that I've put it to you like this before. I first thought that I was first wave, and then I found out that there was a wave of people who woke up in 2012. And numbers are a really big deal, and I'm probably going to get into that next. But as it turns out, I'm actually 4th wave to my knowledge. So anybody who's about 55-ish years old right now, you're first generation. You're the first ones who woke up in this lifespan here on planet Earth right now during this time and only during this time. All right. Next up, you've got 2012, potentially 2016. Some people might say millennials, and that could be like 1980, or that could be literally the literal year of 2000. Doesn't matter. But this wave here, we're sure of, is 2019. And how do you back that up? Well, that's because certain events line up during certain times in life, which is why numbers are so important. So real quick, I'm going to give you a couple more examples of the Mandela effect. Okay. Do you guys remember those? Well, gosh, I don't even think I have to say do you remember. Do you have a pair of shoes called Skechers? How do you spell Skechers? Sketchers. Right? They're shoes, right? Skechers, right? Nope. Skechers never existed. I'm going to show you. They're called Skechers. There's no T in there. I'll show you. Hang on. Alright, look. I'm going to type in Skechers just like... It's so funny. Like, you even try to type it in, and it reminds me of a Jetsons computer. Like, you try to SKETCH, like overloads your computer, and it's like, nope. That was cute and stuff, but good try, but no. All right, so we're going to get on the Skechers. Skechers, I'm typing it in with the T. What happens when I type it in with the T? Well, let's have a good look at what happens when I type it in with the T. That's where I typed it in right there with the T. What does the web pop up? Look at that. Skechers. Skechers. There's no such thing as Skechers. There's Skechers. Watch this. Skechers. Mandela effect. Watch this. Guys, this stuff is crazy. I bet you I don't even have to get like too far into this. Oh yeah, I can't spell, but whatever. Mandela effect. It's not about spelling it right because Lord knows. Skechers. Oh, look at that. It says Mandela effect and the proof is real. There's Skechers. The Mandela effect, that Skechers proof has been proven that Skechers will be changed back to Skechers on July 29th of 2016. Well, that's obviously not true, because this is 2019, and I didn't even find out about this until a few days ago. So yeah, Skeeters did not ever change back to Skechers. Mandela effect. Let's prove that Skeeters is real. Well, look, how about this? Do you own a pair of Skechers? If you do, well, all you have to do is look at the box. Is there a T in there or no? Next one. Here we go. Do y'all remember that children's book, Golden Globe books? It was a book and a cartoon that I specifically recall. They were bears. There was a mama bear, a daddy bear, a son, and a daughter bear. And they were called the Berenstain Bears, like IE or EI. Do you remember that? The Berenstain Bears? They never existed either. And on top of that, there was a third child, like an older son, like a teenager, pubescent age, older son. For real. I'm going to show you that in just a second. All right, so let's do Mandela effect. Oh, and I'm going to show you that they are called the Berenstain Bears. Any book that you have, look at it. It does not say Berenstain Bears. It says Berenstain. And it says Berenstain because the author has in his last name the word stain, S-T-A-I-N, is who it supposedly is written by now, but it's like not only do they take all the books away that we've read and we all remember in the whole wide world reading these books and listening and watching to this cartoon, and also, you know, this was something that I don't know how to make it equivalent to something in today's world because it's poor examples. I mean, it's like Elmo. Like, we didn't have many things to go on back then, okay? We had the Berenstain Bears. That was like basically the only good example of cartoon television that we had. And then they had these things called Golden Globe books. I remember having to order them. I remember trying to raise money for them for school fundraisers, and that's just how I roll. So I remember doing that. I remember they had a golden seal that went down the side of the book. And then the book said clearly, the Berenstain Bears, mom, dad, son, daughter, around the same age-ish. Well, no, there's another child, a teenage son, and it was never the Berenstain, E-I or I-E-N, Bears. It's always been Berenstain. So you tell me how in the world does every book that we've ever seen, every cartoon, every time I type this in, every time I Google it, any video on any platform or social media, I promise you, go, if you think that you have one of these books sitting around in your attic or something, dig it out, look at it. It's not going to say Berenstain Bears. It's going to say Berenstain Bears. So here's really, I just want to show you a picture of that real quick so that you can see exactly how it's spelled, and then I'm going to explain basically what they're trying to say is that it is evidence of sort of like time traveling, that we can, I mean, obviously we can have alternate realities. I will get into that, but I'll never deny that. Of course we have alternate realities. We have infinite realities. We have infinite possibilities of literally everything. So nothing is impossible. Infinite or finite are not strong enough words. And yeah, Mandela effect is basically history going in and erasing everything that was shoved down our throats in an institutionalized type setting. We were forced to learn this crap that we knew was not true, and it drove me nuts. I hated school. I did. I wised up, got a college degree or two or whatever, fine, but you can't force me to learn something I don't want to learn about. And this is why, looking back, you just took it away from me. You just told me that I was going to go to ISS or OSS. Ooh, punish me. Don't don't not let me go to school for 2 weeks because I questioned my teacher. Like, why does this history book say that when I know it's not true? Well, now, can you imagine a kid today? Well, my mom said that, you know, there's this thing called the Mandela effect. Who's right and who's wrong? The internet? Mom? Or does the kid get punished? Think about it. All right, so real quick, this video is pretty long. Guys, just so you know up front right now, I am very used to talking to people for an hour. I do know that we have very short attention spans as human beings, but I have to be extremely clear. I have to look at everything from every angle, analyze it, and give it to you from every direction so that I make sure there's no confusion. At the same time, you know, you can just drop a comment and ask me. Even, hey, my email's even in there, and my Facebook and all that cool stuff. Just ask me any question. I will tell you anything you want to know. I will never lie to you. I will always tell you the truth. And I promise you, I'll fight this. I don't fight the Mandela effect, but I'll swear up and down to the day I die that there were Skechers with a T. And the Berenstain Bears, which I'm still trying to look it up. But, you know, Mandela effect equals alternate realities and or proof of. And while I'm looking it up, remember how I just said that history just, like, it's gone? Oh my gosh. It's not even here. I'm trying to show you a picture of the Berenstain Bears, and it's not here. It's just gone. It's just gone. It's not here. Look at that. So it says that it is literally given name to the phenomenon of when you discover that this is real to you, that is a genuine effect. Well, wait a minute. Hold up. Let's back that up a notch. Remember a minute ago when it said that it was a memory that we all shared? Oh my God, there it is. Look at that. I don't even know what I pushed, but, you know, Mom, Dad, look at the, oh my gosh. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Berenstain Bears. No. Oh God, look at the top of that. Food, health, money, drugs. Oh Lord, I'm not even going to go there. Mom, Dad, brother, sister. Do they look like they're holding a baby right in there to you? No. So where's this kid? Red shirt, red shirt. How come? Why do they look distorted looking back at me? Well, because that is exactly what an alternate universe is. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. My phone's upside down. I don't know. Okay, yeah, sorry. That was not cool. Sorry. But taking a closer look at this real quick, it's sort of like a chess piece. And we'll get back to that. That's symbolic, and I'll show you that. But so is this. This is a universe, and this is a universe. Everybody knows that mirrors, glass windows are a way to sort of like a black hole. It's a like a portal. So here we've got one child. Now it's really weird that that little piece right there is sticking out, but not weird enough for me to go into any details. But it does deform his face if you look at it from a different way. See it? Yeah, interesting. Because why are their faces distorted, and where are these other kids coming from? Anyway, that's all it is. That's enough for that right now on the Mandela effect. I need to break down a whole bunch of other stuff for you guys tonight. So again, I'm sorry for, I know that we all have short attention spans. I am extremely used to doing an hour-long radio show at least once or twice a week. I am extremely comfortable talking for an hour. I will do my best, as I've given you my word, that I will try to keep every single example under 20 minutes. But there are specific ones that I need you to fully understand, so I'm going to do everything in my power, even if it takes me an hour to explain it to you, from every single realm and direction, so that I don't leave any stone unturned. And if I don't do a good enough job, it's okay. Ask me questions. And, you know, in my world, my awakened world, there's no right or wrong. There just isn't. I don't agree or disagree with the Mandela effect. But I'll swear to you all day long that Skechers has a T in it. Anyway, that's it. Berenstain Bears, they say goodnight with all their, I don't know, I guess 3 kids. Whatever. All right, stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in tonight. I'm Tiffany Lewis again. This is Your Awakening Process. And that was a little bit more about the Salem witch trials, mass hysteria, and the Mandela effect. I'll see you guys again soon. Have a good one. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning into my video. Please like, follow, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I'll see you guys next time. Hey guys, right about now you should be able to see my Facebook page on your screen. So please follow that if you want to learn more.